Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast. I'm back with another WNBA topic. And of course, Mark Cuban tweeted just a week or so ago about the WNBA and the college basketball game and the pay differential that exists. And he proposed a fix for it, and we're going to discuss that a little bit. So his tweet basically said the crazy part is no matter what the WNBA does with salaries, every college player will take a pay cut to play in the WNBA. I asked a few ADs, athletic directors, what is the going rate for a star player on a power conference women's basketball team, which was 500K to 1.2 million. And you're always a free agent with the portal. You get your room and board paid for, and you get a good education if you work at it. It's all subsidized by donors and shared school revenues, which make it more similar to Europe, where companies subsidize teams than to the WNBA. In the NBA, you can't go to a sponsor and negotiate a direct payment deal for a player. In college, they effectively can with NIL money. When I have written checks to IU, Indiana University, I knew which players were trying to get the money, although I never tie the money to a specific player. It's up to them. The WNBA needs to look to do the same thing. Let the teams go to the local sponsors and work out payments to players as a part of sponsorship packages. The big name players have agents to do this. The rest make minimal amounts with or without an agent. So that was pretty much what he said from his tweet. And as a former owner of the Dallas Mavericks and a billionaire and a great business mind, I should say, you probably know him from Shark Tank and all these other different TV shows and ventures he's done. But he's made excellent moves as far as business wise. Of course, being a billionaire is probably evident of that. But for him to take his time to consider the WNBA, I think that was huge for him to do, whether it was something he was doing to get an attention or whatever. But he does make a valid point about the pay cuts going from women's college basketball to WNBA. And it's reversed in the NBA, of course, because the NBA is more established, it's more global, it has more fanfare, even though I believe it's losing a lot of it due to the current climate of the NBA. But everyone knows, obviously, that there's a huge pay cut from when college basketball players for women, when they go pro, because when you think about all the players now, they're staying 5 years and sometimes 6 years. Players like Lauren Betts and Olivia Miles, who were very talented to leave, in their second or even third years, but they stayed longer. And people, I don't think they wonder why anymore. It's because of the pay. Make much money as you can now because you're not going to make it later, unless you get the endorsements like a Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese or Asia Wilson. If you're lucky enough to get a shoe deal or get a State Farm commercial or some kind of Gatorade or a Nike advertisement, all of the money is in the advertisements, is so to speak, is what Mark Cuban is referring to. Because you have to make the money somehow, because they have the Unrivaled League, which is headed by Brianna Stewart and Aficia Collier, and what they've been doing amazing things with that, which we would love to see in the NBA, but they don't have to do that because they don't need the money per se. But it's a better alternative for the women than playing overseas, i.e., a lot of players have went through overseas, just trying to having to make the money, and they're still doing it because you see players, you know, um, you see several players that are still playing overseas and are posting on their Instagrams and their social media accounts what they're doing overseas in China, Russia, or whatever it may be. But the Unrivaled provides an alternative route than going that, overseas route, being away from your family, having to go make so much money overseas and then have to come back and dealing with the travel and all that stuff. You can just stay in the States and play Unrivaled, but it's not as lucrative as probably overseas, or even, going the NBA route where they have the revenue already, and the revenue sharing and the TV deals and all that stuff. And the WNBA is getting a lot better with the revenue sharing and things like that. And they're still going through the CBA right now, which is very important. And I think what Mark Cuban said is very vital to what they're doing right now for the CBA to bring that money in, to bring in more fanfare and do all these great things. And it's also done through the sponsorship. And I think it's interesting that he brought up the NIL because they will probably need to adapt the NIL type model until they can get the revenue similar to an NBA or NFL. Probably never reach that level, for a while, but they will have to figure something out that's outside of the scope, a normal scope of thing, and may even have to lessen up these laws and rules to allow the players and teams to do so because we're losing a lot. Well, they're losing a lot of revenue, potential revenue, just because they're not just thinking outside the box. And a lot of people have been on the commissioner for that exact reason because she's just sitting back on her hands because she's making her money, but the players are not making theirs, especially with the sacrifices that they're doing. Because according to Mark Cuban, he said college players, the top players can make anywhere from $500,000 to $1.2 million a year. And we know that number might be higher depending on who it is. But the highest WNBA player makes around 250,000 a year. So they're fighting now to get that up to like a million, which, it's a lot better, but at the same time, it could be pushed a lot more than that. Um, it all starts with the perception of the league as well. There's a lot of people who are just sexist and they don't think that women's sports are interesting and they don't even try to watch these sports. So how can we incentivize or bring more eyes to the league without, um, without, breaking the bank, so to speak? How can they get to a point where they can just change the whole perception of things? And I think that's a bigger problem other than the money itself, because once you change the perception, you the money will be there, the eyes will be there, the fanfare will be there, the league will be better overall. But what Mark Cuban is proposing is local sponsorships, which I think would be a great idea in the big markets. For example, like a New York Liberty or the LA Sparks or even Atlanta Dream. They're in big markets, so to speak. And there's not a lot of teams that smaller market teams in the WNBA right now. I mean, you have a Connecticut, uh, maybe I guess you could say Minnesota is a smaller market, even though it's a big state and has some major cities in it. But those LA, Atlanta, New York teams, can easily find, or I wouldn't say easily find, but they have a plethora of options when it comes to local sponsorships and being able to support that because a lot of these businessmen and business women are visionaries to be able to see that the trajectory is going up for the league. So buy in now before it's too late when the stock is already up. A lot of these people know when to buy at the right time. So I think it's just the perfect time to do that. Um, and in those local markets as well, they can leverage their star power, because most of the major markets have those. Like Las Vegas, for example, they have Aja Wilson, who has a Nike sponsorship, and she has all these other endorsements. She has her own shoe for that reason. Or you can go out to New York that has Sabrina Ionescu, or even has Brianna Stewart. So there's so many different ways that you can go with the sponsorships, and they're getting more teams every year, and are projected to get, I believe, 3 or 4 more teams over the next 5 years. And I'm pretty sure in the next 10 years it'll be pretty close to about 20 teams. So that will make even more parity in the league because we know the women's college basketball game has so much parity, but you only have so many players to go certain places and it's going to eventually run out and it's going to be so competitive that we're going to lose like a lot of great talent because there's simply not enough teams or players to put on teams because they run out of the space. You can only hold about 15 spots. But there's a lot of talent in the women's college basketball game now. So that's another reason why the players can't leave early is because there's not going to be enough room for everybody. So you're only going to, you're going to have an average shelf life of like maybe 1 or 2 years for these players. So the WNBA should definitely consider these things. But I think Mark Cuban hit the nail on the head when he talked about getting local sponsorships and getting potentially investors and things like that to carry them along because they might have to give up some stock or some shares and things like that to incentivize these investments and these sponsorships. But I think it's a great investment going long term, especially seeing the forest through the trees. It's definitely going to be have to be an approach that they take. But tell me what your thoughts about Mark Cuban's tweets, and until next time, I'll see you next time.